A small flame appeared in a decorative palm tree in the Melody Lounge. For a few seconds, that was all the record could see. Not a nightclub already lost. Not a city disaster already underway. A small flame in a fake palm tree, inside a basement lounge, below street level, in a crowded Boston club on November 28, 1942. Ensign's William G. Burns was there when the fire still looked manageable. The National Archives summary, drawing on 1st Naval District records, describes Burns seeing the fire begin slowly and thinking employees could extinguish it. That is the first scale of Coconut Grove, small. Then the scale changes. Within minutes, hundreds of people would be dead or injured. The official investigation would not prove that the boy with the match caused the fire. The public would remember the match because it was simple, but the harder evidence was already standing around the crowd. The palm tree mattered, the ceiling mattered, the wall covering and decoration mattered, but the door mattered most. The first fatal problem was not the match. The record never lets us say that. The fatal problem was the way out. The fire became history because the way out had already been designed to fail. Every person inside eventually needed the building to do one basic thing: release them. Coconut Grove stood at 17 Piedmont Street in Boston. Riley's 1943 report found that it operated as a nightclub serving food, liquor, and entertainment. The premises occupied about 10,250 square feet, with tables, chairs, stools, lounges, service spaces, and a basement room below the street. Those details are not background. They are the beginning of the case file. The 1942 license application listed 100 tables, 400 chairs, and 30 fixed stools. That is furniture on paper. In smoke, it becomes resistance. Narrow paths, blocked sightlines, hard turns, bodies forced through an interior not built to empty quickly. Later summaries put more than 1,000 people inside that night. The exact number is usually given by later accounts, and it should be treated that way. But the scale is clear enough. Coconut Grove was carrying a crowd. The National Archives record keeps one part of that crowd in focus: sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen on authorized leave. They were not there as symbols. They were off duty, looking for dinner, music, drinks, and a few hours away from war. They knew the table. They knew the music. They knew the way they had entered. They did not know which door had been bolted, which route belonged mostly to staff, which exit had been obscured, or which former exit had been turned into a wall. That was the unequal arrangement inside the club. The building knew more than the people inside it. The Melody Lounge was below street level. For many patrons, the most familiar route out was the route that seemed to lead back toward the main public entrance. Other paths existed, but some were service routes, some were not reliably available to patrons, and some could not function as public exits when the crowd needed them. That matters because smoke changes a place. A person who knows a plan can choose between routes. A crowd in heat and smoke does not read a plan. It moves toward memory, light, pressure, and the movement of other bodies. Coconut Grove sold atmosphere. The South Seas effect was not scenery in the abstract. It was material. Artificial palms, decorated walls, low ceilings, cloth, finishes, surfaces chosen to make a Boston interior feel like somewhere else. Before the fire, that was the product. After ignition, it became part of the fuel system. Fire load means the amount of burnable material a space gives to a fire. At Coconut Grove, the fire load was not hidden. It was overhead. It was around the walls. It was built into the mood of the club. Riley's 1943 report found rapid flame spread and burning gases. The National Archives summary also describes flame racing across the ceiling and engulfing the club within minutes, fueled by wall and ceiling decorations. That is the first mechanical fact. The fire did not need to burn the whole building slowly. It could move through the decorated interior fast enough to steal time. It could blind the crowd. It could make the known route feel unknown. It could turn the ceiling into the route of spread. Heavy fire load gives less time. Bad egress gives fewer choices. Egress means the route out. In a public place, egress is not a courtesy. It is not a decorative sign. It is the part of the building that has to work when everything else has begun to fail. The report notes one previous fire at the same location in 1931, with no recorded property loss, deaths, or injuries. That fact should not be stretched. It does not predict 1942. It does not prove anyone knew this exact chain would occur. It only proves that fire was not an impossible category at the address. By 1942, the club did not need a dramatic warning. It needed an interior that could empty under stress. It did not have one. At Coconut Grove, the warning was built into the premises before the first flame appeared. A public entrance dependent on a revolving door, exits that patrons could not reliably find or use, and hardware that could be defeated by a bolt or a key. That warning did not require solving the ignition. It required looking at the business as a place where a crowd might one day have to leave faster than it had entered. A revolving door is a machine for orderly movement. It has compartments. It expects rhythm. It expects separation. It expects one person, then the next, then the next. It works best when nothing is urgent. Coconut Grove asked it to work when the crowd arrived all at once. That is not a subtle design problem. Under pressure, the same mechanism that controls entry can become a bottleneck. When bodies push into it from one side, the rhythm the door needs can collapse. At the Piedmont Street entrance, that problem was waiting before any flame reached it. The rest of the exit system did not correct it. Some service routes allowed employees and a small number of patrons out. That matters. It saves some people. But it does not turn those routes into reliable public exits. An exit known mostly to staff is not an exit for a crowd. A route through service space may be real on a floor plan and still useless to a patron in smoke. A door may exist and still fail if it is locked, obscured, bolted, or unknown. A building can contain openings and still deny escape. The National Archives summary and the court record describe additional exits as blocked, obscured, locked, or unavailable to the public. That is the second mechanical fact. Coconut Grove did not have one door problem. It had an exit system problem. One door had a panic lock. Panic hardware means emergency hardware designed to release when people press against it, so a door can open without a key or special knowledge. That device exists because a crowd under pressure cannot be expected to stop, search, unlock, and reason. The post-fire inspection found that one panic lock had been overridden by a bolt. The safety device existed. Then ordinary operating practice made it irrelevant. Absence is one kind of danger. A defeated safety device is another. It lets a building carry the appearance of protection while denying the function. Another exit had been removed and replaced by brick wall. That detail should remain plain. Not blocked for the evening, not hidden by smoke, not misunderstood by a crowd. Removed. A chair in front of a door can be moved. A locked door can, in theory, be opened by someone with a key. But a former exit replaced with brick is a decision made permanent in the building fabric. By the time the small flame appeared in the Melody Lounge, that exit was not waiting to be found. It was gone. The public story found a simpler object, a match. A 16-year-old busboy, Stanley Tomaszewski, testified that he lit a match while replacing a light bulb in the Melody Lounge, dropped the match, and stepped on it. That testimony gave the disaster a scene people could picture. A boy, a match, a dark corner, a decorative palm tree, a flame. The record permits that scene. It does not permit making him the cause. Riley investigated the match, wiring, fumes, film scraps, chemicals, fuel oil, refrigerants, and other possibilities. His finding was blunt. The original cause of the fire was unknown. Unknown is not a weak word in this case. It is the disciplined word. It stops the story where the evidence stops. Riley was also unable to find that the busboy's conduct caused the fire. That does not erase the testimony. It places it where it belongs, near the beginning. Not at the center of responsibility. The better question is not only how the fire started, it is why a fire of unknown origin found a public interior arranged so that ignition and death could become almost the same event. That question does not depend on solving the first spark. It depends on what was already there. The crowd was there, the decorations were there, the ceiling was there, the doors were there, or missing, or locked, or not usable in the way a public crowd needed them to be usable. Witnesses first saw flame in the basement. Then the ceiling became the route. The fire did not have to move table by table. It moved overhead. The club had been dressed to feel dense, tropical, enclosed, and separate from the city outside. Those qualities helped sell the place before the fire. After ignition, they helped the fire move. The National Archives summary describes flame racing across the ceiling. Riley's report tied the principal loss of life to rapid spread and burning gases pouring through exits. That phrase matters. Burning gases pouring through exits. It means the exit paths were not only channels for people. Once the fire developed, they could become channels for heat and gas. The routes of escape and the routes of fire were no longer fully separate. Carbon monoxide is a poisonous product of incomplete combustion. A person does not need to be touched by flame to be overcome by a toxic atmosphere. The case does not require guessing at individual experiences. The broader point is enough. The air became dangerous. When lights failed and smoke thickened, the club stopped being the place patrons had entered. The tables were still there. The chairs were still there. The fixed stools, narrow paths, lounge corners, stairs and turns were still there. But they no longer behaved like ordinary furniture in ordinary space. They became resistance. A person moving through a familiar room can correct a mistake. A crowd moving through smoke cannot correct many mistakes. Every wrong turn costs time. Every bottleneck grows. Every hidden exit becomes less useful with every second. The floor plan still existed. The crowd could no longer read it. Riley's 1943 report found the hardest timing in the case. Within 2 to 5 minutes of the fire's first appearance, most possible exits, including the public exits, were useless. 2 to 5 minutes. That is not time for a crowd to discover a bad building. It is not time for strangers to become an evacuation system. It is not time for a nightclub full of furniture, smoke, heat, noise, and bodies to reorganize itself around exits many patrons did not know. In a place of assembly, seconds are part of the safety design. They are not free. At the Piedmont Street entrance, a few people got through before flame reached it. Then the revolving door appears to have jammed. The known way out became the choke point. That is, the locked door spine of the case. Not because only one door mattered, and not because every death can be placed at that one entrance. It matters because the main public exit exposed the logic of the whole system. Coconut Grove admitted people through an orderly machine. Then, under emergency pressure, it needed that machine to behave like a wide emergency opening. It did not. After the jam, the problem was no longer only mechanical. Riley found that burning gas poured through the exit itself. Even apart from the jam, the route was becoming part of the fire environment. This is why Coconut Grove is not just a blocked door story. The exits were too few, too obscure, too compromised, and in some cases, unavailable. But once the fire moved, the exits also became routes for heat and gas. A building can fail by holding people in. It can also fail by turning the way out into part of the hazard. Coconut Grove did both. The fire itself did not outmatch the department's equipment for long. Riley wrote that rescue work was the first object of responding companies. He also wrote that if the building had been empty, the fire could have been extinguished more promptly. That distinction is cold, but necessary. In an empty club, the same fire could be fought primarily as a fire. In the actual club, the fire department met a rescue disaster inside a failed assembly space. The National Archives summary, drawing on 1st Naval District records, describes trucks, stretchers, hospital corpsmen, calls from the yard, and officers trying to determine which servicemen on leave had not returned. The aftermath became a system of accounting: hospitals receiving the injured, military channels checking leave, officers trying to match names to absence. Men who had been off duty had to be located through the machinery of war because they had disappeared inside a civilian nightclub. Later summaries often give 492 deaths. Riley's report recorded 490 deaths and 166 injuries under the Boston Committee on Public Safety Accounting. The difference should not be erased for smoothness. Both numbers describe a mass casualty event. The difference belongs to source and accounting. Precision does not weaken the story, it strengthens trust in it. Fire Commissioner William Arthur Riley began the investigation the next day. Public hearings ran until January 1943, then stopped to avoid interfering with criminal proceedings. The report that followed did not solve the first spark. It did something more useful for prevention. It mapped the conditions that made any fire catastrophic. The investigation could not name the first cause, but the court could name the duty. The public wanted to know who started it. The official and legal record moved toward a harder question. Who controlled the premises that could not survive any fire? That question shaped both reform and prosecution. The 1943 legislation did something basic that had not been basic enough before. It defined a place of assembly, meaning an occupancy where people gather in numbers that make crowd safety a distinct problem. It required a certificate of safety with maximum occupancy. It prohibited revolving doors in that occupancy. The law did not ban the match. It tried to solve the room. Those were not abstract legal corrections. They answered physical facts. How many people may be admitted? Whether the building has been certified for that number. Whether a public assembly space may depend on a revolving door as a required exit. The law arrived after the club had explained the problem in bodies. Riley's recommendations moved through the same evidence: automatic sprinklers, illuminated exit signs, panic locks, better egress, limits on flammable fabrics and suspended cloth false ceilings, ventilation for basement assembly rooms. That list is not bureaucratic filler. It is a reconstruction of failure. Sprinklers answer rapid fire development. Illuminated signs answer smoke and confusion. Panic hardware answers crowd pressure. Better egress answers bad routing. Limits on flammable decoration answer the ceiling and the atmosphere the club had sold. Ventilation answers the basement lounge where air itself became dangerous. After Coconut Grove, safety language became more physical because the disaster had been physical at every point. Barnett Wolanski's case did not turn on whether he struck a match. That is the pivot many simplified accounts miss. The court record made control the live issue: who maintained the premises, who profited from them, and who owed the invited public a usable way out. Wolanski had complete operational control of the club and premises. The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court later held that manslaughter did not require proving Wolanski caused the ignition. Reckless disregard of safety in the event of any fire could suffice. That legal point matters because it separates cause from responsibility. The law did not have to prove who lit the first flame. It had to decide who left the public with no safe answer to any flame. Wolanski was convicted on the submitted counts, sentenced to concurrent terms of 12 to 15 years, and the judgment was affirmed. The verdict was not that he intended harm. It was that control carries duty. A public nightclub is not ordinary private space once it sells food, liquor, and entertainment to a crowd. Patrons do not enter as inspectors. They do not test bolts. They do not measure exit capacity. They do not check whether a panic lock has been overridden or whether a former exit has become brick. They enter because the club is open. The duty belongs to the people who operate it and to the system that permits it to receive the public. The clean myth says the boy with the match caused Coconut Grove. The record does not say that. It says he testified about the match. It says the commissioner could not identify the original cause. It says Riley could not find that the busboy's conduct caused the fire. And it says the court did not need Wolanski to be the cause of the ignition to hold him criminally responsible for deaths arising from reckless safety failure. That is where the myth breaks. The match story is efficient. It gives the public a single beginning and a single image. It turns the disaster into a terrible accident with one small human action near the start. The record is less efficient and more severe. It says the origin was unknown. Then it asks why the club was ready to kill when any fire arrived. My read is that the match story survives because it is easier than the legal one. A match is a moment. A door system is a decision repeated until everyone stops seeing it as a decision. The match story lets responsibility shrink to a spark. The legal story forces responsibility back into the premises, into management, into code, into inspection, and into the ordinary choices that decide whether a public place can release a crowd under pressure. That is why the aftermath matters. The reforms were not only about preventing one kind of ignition, they were about refusing to let a public assembly depend on luck after ignition. After Coconut Grove, law learned to speak in the language of exits: assembly occupancy, maximum admissions, certificates of safety, illuminated signs, panic hardware, revolving door limits, materials that could not be hung above a crowd just because they helped sell a mood. The palm trees became more than decoration in the record. The doors became more than carpentry. The crowd became more than a number. Together they forced a legal vocabulary for what the building had failed to do. No statute could undo the night. No investigation could restore the people who never left. But the record could identify the failure clearly enough that future rooms would have fewer excuses. A public assembly space has to be treated as a life safety system before anything goes wrong. Its theme is secondary. Its profit is secondary. Its familiarity is secondary. Its first duty is to give people back. If the cause of the first flame remains unknown, the verdict does not. Coconut Grove was not made deadly by mystery alone. It was made deadly by a premises prepared to fail under the exact pressure a public place must be able to withstand. My read is that Coconut Grove's warning was not hidden in a file. It was standing in the room, the palm trees, the doors, and the crowd between them.